The workers are calling me. They are very scared. There are things moving around, like a big ladder that just took off the floor by itself and started swirling around in the air. And of course, these things never happen. And there was nobody there who was messing with the ladder. It was just flying in the air.
Episode 20. We made it. Welcome back to Hey That's Weird, the show that features your spooky and strange stories told by you. Big thanks this week to Amy, Henrique, Shaw9598 and Small Moon for reaching out on Spotify with their thoughts on the episode. And an added huge thanks to one of Hey That's Weird's most loyal listeners, Frogs Up My Sleeves, who continues every episode to encourage me. Thank you, friend. First of all, I wanted to address the sizable elephant in the room. Did you hear ads before the episode started today? If yes, I'm testing something new, so just bear with me. I know I said in earlier episodes that I wouldn't feature ads on this show, and my goal is to not do that. But after some major changes in my personal life recently, I'm trying to find ways to keep this going financially while working my way through things. So no, you won't hear ads during the episode. The last thing I want to do is break your guys' immersion when someone's telling a story. But you may hear them before and after the episodes going forward. I appreciate your understanding, but if this is a deal breaker for you, I totally get it. Anyway, now that's out of the way, I want to welcome this week's guest, Lais. Me and Lais are in the same podcasters group on Facebook. And after I reached out looking for new guests, she came forward with her amazing stories. I don't want to give anything away, so I'll let her get into it. But I encourage you to listen with an open mind. Without further ado, Lais, let's get weird.
So my name is Lais. I was born in Brazil. I grew up in Germany. I am absolutely honored to be on the Hey That's Weird podcast, which I absolutely love. I went to study in the UK. I studied business and I had a very corporate background. I then moved to Switzerland. I still had a corporate career. But at the end of my 20s, I started to feel really unfulfilled with my life. At my job, I didn't know what else would fulfill me, so I felt I didn't have a life purpose. My relationship wasn't going well. It felt quite karmic in the sense that it was on and off, and when things were off, they were really off, and when they were good, they were really good. So it was just costing me so much energy to go through my day every day. And I felt burned out emotionally, spiritually. And so I decided to move to Thailand for 1 or 2 months. I wanted to take care of myself. That was the reasoning behind it. To take a sabbatical, to take care of myself. I quit my jobs. And I subscribed to learn more about yoga and meditation, energy healing, just out of selfish reasons. I wanted to take care of myself. And so I found this mansion in the middle of Bangkok, in the city center. It was called Rompo Mansion. And it was this place where you had everything that you needed. So it felt very convenient. There was a very big swimming pool. There were a few different cafes and a restaurant inside. There was a little supermarket, a massage parlor, even a hairdresser. So I just really loved that space. And it wasn't like the newer high-rise buildings that were all around me with 30 plus floors. It only had 10 floors. And it was a little bit older. And I wouldn't say it felt haunted. The minute I went in, I didn't feel, there was something significantly off with that place. But I checked in and went to my room, unpacked. That feeling when you feel like somebody is observing you, or you don't feel like quite alone, even though you know you are alone. So it felt a little bit strange. But I just shrugged it off and I said, I don't know, I'm just making up things. It continued for a few days, and I started to look for hidden cameras because I thought maybe that's what I'm sensing, like some hidden cameras filming me, but I couldn't find any, and it was quite a small room. You would have found cameras if they were there. And so I started with my program, with energy healing, with yoga, and I started to enjoy taking care of myself. But still, every time I came home, I just felt there was something off. And I always felt there was something not quite right in that room, and I couldn't explain it. And so after maybe 1 week or 10 days, I was in bed, I was sleeping, and suddenly a male voice called my name in a really creepy way.
Lais.
And I just woke up in a complete paralysis and shocked and went right into freeze mode because I couldn't even get out of bed. I couldn't move. And I still remember that voice. And I just knew this is not a friendly voice. There's somebody here, something is here trying to communicate with me. And I completely freaked out. I managed to put on the light next to me. And suddenly I had the feeling that it's about to get worse. That's when the first book flew off the shelf, fell onto the floor, and then one book after the other started flying off that shelf. Not all together, but one by one, in a really angry way. And I knew, oh my God, I'm really not alone here. There's a presence here, and that presence is not happy that I am here. At that point, I had never encountered any spirits or any ghosts. I was, as I said, I was very corporate-minded. I had never encountered such a thing. And so I was still in freeze mode. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even pick up the books. I was in such a shock and such a state where I sat there in bed the rest of the night. This was at 3 a.m. with the light on until I could finally run to my school where I was learning energy healing and meditation. And I knew that my teacher, he was very spiritual, and I knew that he also was a medium who could communicate with spirits, and he even offered courses to learn how to remove spirits from home. So I desperately needed his help. And I asked him, could you come to my room and just check what's happening, because I cannot live there like this. And he said,
Normally I charge, of course, for my services, but I have a group here of 6 students who this weekend will be learning how to do space clearings, and it would be such a great case study then for them to all together come to your room and to take care of the situation.
And so I said, well, that's great, even though for those next few days until the weekend, I couldn't sleep a single night. I still feel very much that presence. I felt that anger. I felt observed. I felt like I was barely tolerated in there. So weekend came, my teacher and the 6 students from all over the world came to Rompo Mansion, and they entered my room, and immediately some of them were like, oh my God, this really feels off here. How could you even be here for 10 days or 2 weeks by that time? This feels really creepy. And the teacher agreed, and so I was shocked. But then they started with their rituals and meditating and figuring out what was happening, why that spirit was there in the first place. And so eventually they all found out that this had been a man who died of suicide in that room and has been present there ever since. And he left and departed deeply sad, deeply angry with his own life, with the world around him, and that anger was still very much present. Finally, once they understood his story, they were able to communicate with him and to help him cross over, or to step into the light, as they called it. I did feel that shift immediately when they said, well, he left now. I felt the room was suddenly much lighter. I didn't feel observed anymore. I didn't feel that tension in the air. And I was speechless about this whole experience. So the team went down to the reception and they asked to speak to somebody who had been there for a longer time. And they said, did somebody ever end their life here in this particular room? And they confirmed that exactly this had happened. What other proof do we need then? So they went all home, and within their team there was a French guy, there was a Kuwaiti guy who had flown in from Kuwait to learn this course. He went back to his hotel. And the next morning, we all met up in that school again. Me for my different courses, them to continue with the space clearing course. And I asked the Kuwaiti guy, because he came in and he didn't seem to be in a particularly good and chatty mood. And he said,
"Yeah, don't talk to me, please."
And I was like, "Oh my God, what happened to you? Was it too intense yesterday?" And he said,
"Yeah, I cannot talk now."
So once my teacher arrived, he also noticed something was off with the Kuwaiti guy. And he asked, "Are you okay?" And he said,
"Something followed me back home to my hotel and messed with me the entire night, and he kept switching on and off the light, and the door lock kept switching back and forth, and so I didn't sleep at all last night, and I'm not happy about that."
My teacher was like, "Oh my God. Yeah, of course we only cleared this one room, but who knows what else was there in that building." So he asked me if I would be okay to take them all back to the building and figure out what else happened there. So the next day they all came back and they wandered around the different floors, and they went up to the 9th floor, then the 10th floor, and that's where everyone's hair stood up on their bodies. They were like, "This is the creepiest floor. There's so much negative energy here, not just one spirit, they could sense a few, and it felt really haunted on the entire floor." So they started meditating again, and they started to connect to all these different spirits, and there was at least one more spirit that had died of suicide on that floor. So they started clearing them all one by one, helping them cross over. And again, we all went down to reception and we inquired about that particular floor and the energy there, the vibes that were completely off, and just the fact that it was so haunted. And again, which they hadn't disclosed the first time around, they said,
"Yes, that floor is very haunted, and even our cleaners oftentimes refuse to go there."
So I was like, well, that's good to know. Why didn't you share this before? But yes, that just confirmed that that building was very haunted, that terrible things had happened there. A lot of trauma had happened there. And I was just so grateful that this team and my teacher could come and not just help my room, but then, the entire building. And so I'm sharing all of this because that was my very first, very scary experience, but something shifted in me after that. And something within me, my intuition, my gut feeling told me I should also learn how to help these spirits cross over, because suddenly I started to develop some sort of empathy, compassion for them, for the stories that they had in their lives before they died. And I became more curious about this world, this invisible world. I was very scared to sign up for that course because I just didn't know how I would handle things, but I did. And it was a very intensive course. I went through it. I learned how to space clear myself. And so this is how I now can share many, many more stories, because I've been doing this for over 15 years. So I would love to share a few of my favorite stories that I like to share. One story took place in the US, and I work remotely, so I was based in Europe, and this client reached out from the US who's based in Chicago, but she bought this home in Cape Cod, and it was an old home, a beautiful old home that she was refurbishing. She had workers there who were renovating the entire home, and she called me from Chicago and said something is off in that home. The workers are calling me. They are very scared. There are things moving around, like a big ladder that just took off the floor by itself and started swirling around in the air. And of course, these things never happen. And there was nobody there who was messing with the ladder. It was just flying in the air. And there's little fires starting everywhere, and nobody's putting the fire on. No one is understanding why all of this is happening. And she said, by talking to the neighbors, she understood that a woman had lived there before who was into the occult, like she was a witch. And of course, witches are not all bad. There's good healers and witches, but she was not one of them. So when I remotely connected to that home, I could sense that indeed she had been using the occult for more negative things in life. I could sense the pentagram, which usually is a symbol of protection, but she had used it in the inverted way. So when the pentagram is inverted, it can be used for negative energy and harming people. And I could sense that energy around the house. I was not understanding why that symbol would create things to move. So I kept looking, and then I went to the kitchen. And this is called remote viewing, by the way, when you can zone your awareness or project your awareness into a different location, and you get glimpses or little visions or like a download of things that are happening in that home without being there. And so I zoned my awareness into the kitchen, and I found an elderly lady in spirit form who was deeply upset about the kitchen, and she didn't want to leave because it was her home. And I connected to my client and I asked what was happening in the kitchen, and she said, yeah, right now, yesterday they started renovating the kitchen. And so I said, one of the previous owners who had lived there way before you, she's still in the house and she's upset about all these renovations and, the house just shifting so many owners. And yet I didn't have the feeling that this elderly lady was capable of doing all those things, putting on fires and moving items around. So I kept looking, and then I found in the garden there were 2 nature spirits. There's many different nature spirits. Some take care of trees, others take care of the plant world, the flowers. And those 2 particular, though, they were not even American. They came from Oman. So when they told me that, I immediately thought, but how did you make it all the way to the US? And they called themselves jinns. So I know many people, many listeners here will know jinns from stories like Aladdin and the Wonder Lamp. That was a jinn who would make your wishes come true. And of course, those jinns are nothing like that. They are nature spirits. They are primal energies that are not supposed to be in people's homes. They are supposed to be in nature. But people who are into the occult, and I have been part of many Facebook groups, and you can find it everywhere on the internet, that there are practitioners who try and catch those jinns, and they put them into jars or into, not lamps, but some form of container because they want to work with them. And so I don't know exactly what had happened, if she had summoned them or if she had a client from Oman who came to see her and he left them behind, or it was just so odd. It was the craziest story I had ever encountered until that moment. And I was talking to my spirit guides because immediately I felt they are very powerful, and they admitted it was them who were moving things around and causing the little fires. And so my spirit guide said, yes, we need to rehome them. They need to go back home to Oman. And so luckily I've traveled extensively through the Middle East. I love the Middle East. I've been to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Lebanon, traveled all over. And so I could visualize the deserts, and I tried to transmit telepathically my love for the Middle East and the desert. And they started receiving those images and the sensations I had when I was in the Middle East, and they immediately felt homesick in a way. And so my guides helped them to go back to Oman and settle them back in where they used to be. And so they left. They left that house and the hauntings stopped. I also helped the lady cross over, the elderly lady. And since then, there have been no activity in the house. Everything was calm. My client felt good when she went there and moved in. So there was nothing whatsoever that felt haunted anymore. So yes, that is one of my peculiar paranormal stories that even I, that had witnessed so many different things, was completely shocked to hear about, because I had never encountered jinns, especially not from Oman. But yes, there are powerful nature spirits out there in every country, and we're not supposed to capture them or to treat them unwell. We have to let them live their life, and that's it. So another story I would love to share is another American client who reached out to me, and I think she was based in California somewhere. And she was into vintage items, and especially into gramophones, like the vintage old type gramophones. And she was looking online everywhere, and she found this, I think it was called a Victriola, and she found it in an online shop, and she bought it. It was delivered, and she put it in the living room, and she was super excited because she could listen to her records that way. But as of the day where it was delivered and she put it in the living room that night, she had the worst nightmares, and she felt that something was messing with her dreams. And a bit like me in Bangkok, she felt like there was a presence, a malevolent presence, something that was trying to catch her attention. Right after that, the next day, she started to hear really loud knocking on the door. And when she went to open the door, nobody was there. And so whatever was there, whatever was present in that house suddenly had the power to make really loud noises, to mess with her in her dream state. And she also felt like it was touching her on her body. And so she really freaked out, was very scared. I assessed the situation remotely and I found a middle-aged man. And he came with a gramophone that was clear. He was attached to it, and I tried to understand his story. So I communicated with him, and I understood that he had lived in Austria during the Second World War, and I understood he was Jewish, and he had escaped the World War because, of course, he was not safe as a Jewish person, and he emigrated to the US to stay alive, basically. And he was a musician. He used to play in an orchestra, and music was his way of healing as well from the trauma of the Second World War and losing family members, and music was his one and only passion in life. And he bought that gramophone for himself because even outside of the orchestra he loved to listen to music, and so that was his most prized possession. That happens a lot, that when people die, they are attached either to their homes or to certain items or to certain people, and they find it very hard to let go. And that was his story. He was enraged that this gramophone, that was his most prized possession, was being sold to random strangers, that it was in that shop and that anybody could just go and get it, and he was just very upset about it. And so by communicating with him, I understood about his trauma. I'm half German, so of course there was this part of me that was deeply sorry for what the Germans did to the Jews and the Holocaust, and I explained that to him. And I apologized on behalf of all Germans what had happened to him and his family. I tried to paint a picture for him that it's maybe time for him to step into the light, to find eternal peace and to let go, including his prized possession. And that's when he started to listen, and indeed he crossed over. It was very beautiful, very emotional as well for me as a German to witness that, and he left. And yes, and then all the spooky vibes stopped happening in that home. She felt safe and secure. There were no sounds anymore. She could sleep well. She could listen to her records. And everything went back to normal. And that story is also one of my most special ones because it again shows that some of those poltergeists have a very poignant story to share if we only take the time to listen to them. And yeah, that's why I'm sharing it here. I think I'm coming to an end now of my stories. There's many more, but I don't want to take up too much time here. But yes, I was very honored to share some of these stories. And thank you so much for having me on. Goodbye, everyone.
On Hey That's Weird, I like to give my guests a platform to advertise or promote something that they're passionate about. Here's Lais's, and listen up, she has a freebie for you.
And if anything in today's episode made you think of your own space, that feeling that something feels a bit off but you can't quite name it, you don't have to figure it out all alone. I offer free remote assessments where I tune into your home and see what's really going on beneath the surface. Or if you prefer to start gently on your own, there's also a free energetic reset you can download and follow in your own time. You'll find both on my website, spaceclearingacademy.com, and I've linked everything in the show notes. Goodbye.
That does it for episode 20. Massive thanks to Lais for reaching out to me and sharing her stories that are so personal to her. Also, it's Lais's birthday this week, so a massive happy birthday and thanks for squeezing in the time to record the show while moving house as well. If you have a story or multiple stories and want to make an episode with me, you can email me at heythat'sweirdpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at heythat'sweirdpodcast. Thanks again for listening. Don't let the weight of the world right now get you down. Things are really rough out there. But if I could suggest anything, it'd be to do something creative, hang out with a friend, or help people in vulnerable positions. Or just do something that makes you happy. I appreciate you all listening this deep into the episode. I'll catch you on the next one. Until next time, stay weird.